Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to wait a few minutes here just for a couple of last minute people that might join us, and then we'll get going. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started today. So hello and welcome to the Fall 2021 Roadway Watercourse Crossing webinar series presented by the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Collaborative. My name is Matthew Huberto, and I'll be your host throughout this series. The Alberta Watercourse Crossing Collaborative is a non-for-profit organization whose primary objective is to restore lost and damaged fish habitat from poorly installed and maintained watercourse crossings. We achieve this objective through education and information transfer from subject matter experts to practitioners. This webinar series was created to help achieve those objectives by discussing important topics in an easily accessible format. All of these webinars are recorded and will be available on AWC3's website. Just a housekeeping note. The red box with the white arrow in the top right corner of your screen opens your menu and allows you to type in questions. Questions will be answered at the end of your presentation. Today's presentation will be on the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Program and Management Directive and will be presented by Wendy Harrison from Alberta Environment and Parks. Wendy was born and raised in northern Alberta and has worked all over the province, as well as in Vancouver Island and in the Yukon. She has a BSc from the University of Alberta in Conservation Biology and an MA from the U of Vic in Environmental Studies. Wendy has worked as a field biologist, conservation officer, parks warden, dangerous goods inspectors, and as an environmental emergency response manager for the province of Alberta. Currently, Wendy is the Land, Ecosystem, and Conservation Manager for the Northern Region of Alberta. Since 2018, Wendy has led the design and coordination of the Watercourse Crossing Program for the Ministry of Environment and Parks. Without further ado, here's Wendy.
Hey, good afternoon, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Thanks for the introduction, Matthew. I have our website here if anybody wants any further information on the program. So as mentioned, I'm going to be introducing the Watercourse Crossing Program Management Directive today. So I'll give a bit of a synopsis of the program, but then I'll be delivering kind of the major components of the directive. Just want to make sure everyone can see my screen here. Sorry, I'm just having difficulty with the slideshow function. There we go. Perfect. Can everybody see the slide?
Yeah, it's all clear on my end.
Excellent. Okay, so the reason why we're all here is there's a widespread legacy issue of poorly maintained and constructed crossings throughout the province that's blocking and degrading aquatic habitat, and it's one of the major drivers of our native trout collapsing. So there's an urgent need to determine where these crossings are, what state they're in, and how we can determine how to manage them. We need to know where they are and what condition they're in. So my colleagues later on in the webinar series will be briefing you on the state of the native trout in the province. So as you know, the magnitude of the watercourse crossing program is big, with upwards of 40% of crossings not functioning properly. And the scope of the problem is province-wide. And the crossing issues overlap multiple pieces of legislation and regulators, including Alberta Energy Regulator, Department of Fisheries and Ocean, Environment and Parks, and Agriculture and Forestry. There's also a diversity of crossing owners and stewardship groups working in habitat restoration. So the main focus of the program is habitat restoration, education, and awareness. So this requires coordination between the regulators with overlapping mandates, stakeholder engagement, and the identification and targeting of priority watersheds. Also, managing the data to identify priority remediation. So I'll be discussing in greater detail the watercourse crossing program on November 18th during the plenary session. So the directive is a regulatory strategy to coordinate regulators and engage crossing owners. So this you can see here is the 2015 version, which outlines the intent to move to a collaborative watershed-based approach to crossing management. The 2020 update to the directive is meant to optimize fiscal management, compliance performance, and enhance environmental stewardship by prioritizing the order and rate in which watercourse crossings are restored within the watershed. So this includes multi-stakeholder engagement, self-inspection reporting. This includes centralizing and standardizing the data to understand the state of the watershed. Also the risk assessment, priority remediation and coordination, and creating conditions to manage risk for the life cycle of the crossing. Crossing owners not participating in the regulatory strategy will continue to be subject to the existing regulatory compliance regime, in which crossing owners will be required to take immediate restoration action for non-compliant crossings. So here I've got a 30-second clip from Michael Short through the Let's Go Outdoors. He created a video just kind of summarizing the watercourse crossing program and the purpose of the directive. It's just 30 seconds long.
There are thousands of stream crossings running from the eastern slopes down through the boreal forest. Many of these watercourse crossings pose a serious threat to our native fish species by preventing or impairing fish movement and resulting in habitat fragmentation. Crossings can also create sedimentation issues, leaving an impact on spawning beds. The Watercourse Crossing Program is pulling together government agencies and collaborating with industry to ensure new and old crossings are meeting a standard that will improve fish movement and habitat.
Perfect. So the full 8-minute video is posted on our website if anybody wants to go and check it out. So as I mentioned, I'll be covering the 4 main components of the directive. The first component is understanding and setting out the rules and responsibilities of both the crossing owner and the regulators. So as detailed here, the regulators will synchronize watercourse crossing program efforts and data across the regulators to ensure efforts implemented by crossing owners are coordinated, strategic, and align with fish management and habitat outcomes. We also identify areas of high risk to fish populations, assign fish population risk to watersheds provincially, and establish targeted timeframes and priority for remediation. So responsible for receiving and centralizing inspection data for all crossings provincially. We continue to audit on crossing owner inspection data and perform audits on crossings where remediation action has taken place to verify the watercourse crossing has been restored. So on the crossing owner side, they're to ensure compliance of applicable legislation, policy, and operating conditions, develop inspection programs and report on watercourse crossings to the appropriate regulator, and take proactive measures to remediate crossings when they're failing throughout the province, and those efforts to be prioritized to crossings within high-risk watersheds to meet fish recovery objectives. So the second component is the monitoring and reporting requirement. In the next section, I'll briefly touch on the data collection and how it informs watershed health and priority remediation work. So disposition holders in Alberta manage thousands of kilometers of roads, of which cross hundreds and thousands of watercourses. And 40% of these watercourse crossings inspected do not meet fish passage standards and are in non-compliance. So the directive describes the responsibility of the crossing owner to develop an inspection program, report the data to the regulator, and remediate in priority order. So how's the data to be collected and submitted? We created a free app that standardizes the assessment of crossings and centralizes the data. It's called the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Inventory application. So we first developed the app last year and tested it with various user groups and updated it just this past spring. So this app is used for public, stewardship groups, crossing owners, and the regulators. So the app prompts the user to look for evidence of issues with size, skew, depth, angle, and/or sedimentation at the crossing site. An assessment should only take about 5 to 15 minutes per site, and there's no training required to use this app. After an inspection is submitted via the app, it gets loaded up into the ABWCI dashboard in your web browser, which is accessible on your desktop. So the public can look at their individual inspections, companies or stewardship groups can look at their group's inspections, and the regulator can look at all the data. So it's got tiered accessibility. On the left is an overview of the ABWCI dashboard, and the fish icon represents clusters of watercourse crossing inspections. And on the right is an example of a user viewing an inspection. So you have the map for location and inspection details coming up on the right. So we're able to identify high-risk sites that need to be inspected using the app. We're currently using this to direct internal staff for auditing purposes and to Alberta Transportation and counties to manage their crossings. We've been approached by multiple stewardship groups in their areas of interest as well. So this here is depicted as on the left is a map of Berlin Wildhay watershed north of Hinton. And you can see the colored dots indicate inspection locations that have identified fish passage or erosion issues. And the black dots are the locations where we still need inspections completed that we've assigned a risk using a model. So I just shared with you the tool to collect and submit the data, but given the sheer size and the extent of the problem of crossings, where do we prioritize remediation? This leads us to the next section of the directive. So Alberta is the first province to have categorized their watersheds and prioritize them based on biological priorities. So we have all 403 watersheds in Alberta ranked in order of biological priority, depicted in the map on the left. The 3 priority categories indicate urgency for fish recovery. So priority was determined using road density, stream class, and number of sensitive species. And as you can see, the higher priority watersheds for our focus is along the eastern slopes. So to reestablish natural flows and habitat to grow healthy fish populations, remediation work has to be coordinated and prioritized at this watershed level. While remediation work is required in all watersheds when a watercourse crossing fails, we need to direct efforts for remediation of non-compliant crossings in areas of greatest need for fish recovery. So the remediation work within high-risk watersheds will be assessed and prioritized based on multiple factors, which include risk to fish populations, overall remediation benefit to the watershed, coordination of remediation works amongst multi-crossing owners. So we built a dashboard that provides guidance on prioritizing remediation. Axel Anderson will be presenting later in the webinar series detailing this tool and the upcoming planning process. As you can see here, this is just one screenshot of the platform. It displays the road densities, crossing densities, number of courses with inspections, type of crossings. It visually shows a network above barriers in red and ranks crossings based on the upstream distance. So as you can see here, I made a note at the bottom here. Essentially, it calculates and displays upstream distance, critical habitat, inspection information, and the watershed area. It's able to pull data from the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Inspection app and any other source. And it can control the view of different components. So we'll develop tiered access to the data, depending on what type of stakeholder or regulator. So remediation is expensive and needs to focus on crossings that will have the greatest impact for fish sustainability. So this, as we've mentioned before, it's got to provide the best bang for the buck. And so once we have more data, we can do this exercise for all of the watersheds. So the fourth component of the directive is to develop conditions to manage risk for the life cycle of the crossing. So the watercourse crossing life cycle approach will use conditions in authorizations designed to manage watershed risk. So this will include monitoring and reporting requirements based on watershed risk and structure type. And the high-risk watersheds are in the landscape analysis tool, that's called the LAT layer, to inform crossing owners in the discovery phase of their approval and guide conditions for enhanced crossings. So I believe Mike Hunka with AER and Owen Cook with AEP will be going into detail regarding legislation and the compliance pieces. So that's a summary of the Watercourse Crossing Management Directive. I'd encourage you guys to visit our site for more information or links to any of the policy documents or videos that I've mentioned. And I'll open up to any questions you may have.
All right, so this is the question and answer period of our webinar. Again, if you have any questions, you are able to type them in the question on the go to webinar menu in the question box there. All right, so we have a question. Our first question is there any other jurisdictions which is the following the same watercourse crossing restoration protocols? So that's, is there any other jurisdiction which is following the same watercourse crossing restoration protocols?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that we're the only province to have created HUC 8 to be able to categorize our watersheds, and in that sense been able to prioritize them. So that's unique. I believe we're the only ones to have an inspection app or a manual for assessing crossings. I know that BC has developed a framework in collaboration with Canadian Wildlife Federation in kind of engaging stakeholders in priority remediation in a couple of their watersheds. So we're looking at that. And the Canadian Wildlife Federation has pulled together representatives from the different provinces to develop a national barrier database. So those are kind of the only initiatives that I'm aware of that are similar. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure Alberta is leading in some of these tools that we've developed.
Perfect. Our second question is, some of these prioritization tools would be extremely valuable for practitioners working in the field. Are they or will they become publicly available?
The watershed prioritization list is available on our website, and it's in the form of a memo. So it goes through the analysis and methodology of how the watersheds were prioritized, and then it has the list. I also have the spatial files. If anyone would like to have access to those, I can make those available.
Perfect. Another question here is how will monitoring of restored crossings be completed? By owner or by Government of Alberta?
By both. It is a responsibility of the crossing owner to go back and inspect and monitor their sites. But it's also the regulator's responsibility to create and form an auditing program, which includes sites that have been remediated. We're also looking into the methodology and a pilot of studying and researching existing failed crossings, and then a follow-up to post-remediation. And there'll be more to come on that one if we secure funding.
Okay, another question is a revisitation of the code of practice in the scope of, oh, 1 second. Sorry, my screen moved on me. So is a revisitation of the code of practice in the scope of the watercourse crossing program?
For sure. Both an updating of the code of practice, as well as we've committed with the directive to make sure it's a living document as well. So crossing owner can expect to be engaged on a revision of that as well.
Okay, and is there or will the dashboard be publicly available?
Yes, I believe so. We're just, Axel will go into more detail with folks, but I believe the purpose, we're testing it right now with a few stakeholders just to make sure that the metrics that are being displayed and modeled are kind of useful. And we'll go through, or plan to go through a kind of a pilot in the Berland to use the Crossing Owner Advisory Committee to kind of test collaborative priority remediation using the dashboard, hopefully in December. And you know, as we get it formed and functioning, the idea is to have that tiered access to the portal, just like we do to the app. So depending on who your affiliation is, depending on the extent of the information you'll see in the metrics.
Perfect. We have another question here. How do you plan to enforce or educate consulting firms and engineers on this program? How are you going to have the consultants adhere to the proposed changes in the directive? For example, why would an engineer design a crossing as a type 1 or type 2 crossing for a class 3 or a class C stream in the eastern slopes if it is not outlined in the code of practice?
No, that's a good point. That's where we really have to ensure that we're engaged with our communications, because you have a directive that's it's policy driven. It's meant to add that clarity to the legislation. So yeah, it kind of behooves us to make sure that we are pushing out the information that's in the directive, because that clarity in the legislation is needed, right? So I'm not sure how else to kind of, I guess I would look to the AWC3's advice in terms of really getting that message down to the backhoe operator, like the guy putting the pipe in the ground, and to the engineering firms. It would be great for us to work further down the line in leveraging a group like this to be able to reach out to those key folks that are involved in the assessment, design, and implementation of these crossings.
And another question here relating to Code of Practice. Is there a timeline for when the Code of Practice will be updated?
I don't have that yet, so I will endeavor to work through, I guess, the AWC3 to circle back on that question when I have a timeline from the water policy team.
Okay, and Mercer's 2 FMAs have over 500 watersheds identified. Do the 400 watersheds identified for the province relate to this finer level HUC 8 breakdown?
Can you read that? I'm sorry, can you clarify that question a bit for me?
Okay, maybe the asker can clarify that one and then we'll just circle back to it if they just want to retype it.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so, all right, here's another one. Do you have a timeline as to when the COP will be updated or when the engagement regarding changes will occur?
I think that was a question we just had. So I'll have to get clarification from the policy team to see, to get back to you with the timeline on it. I don't have it right now.
Okay, I believe that is all of our questions as of right now. So we have another question here. Is there an update to the app expected to occur?
That's a good question. We're getting we're just nearing the end of the field season. We had an update in March, April. So what we'll do is we'll get the data, we'll get the feedback from the different stewardship groups and stakeholders that have been using it, and take stock of what we would need to update it to make it even better. So if we were to do it, it would probably occur over the winter to be launched before the next field season.
Perfect. And what is the reason behind the restricted access for submitting watercourse crossing inspections?
How do you mean by restricted access to submitting?
I'm not sure, possibly if the asker could clarify that.
Do you mean the restriction to be able to see the data extent in the ABWCI dashboard?
Yes, exactly is what he said.
Right, so for example, a regulator can see all the data, all the information, the crossing owner, the inspection, whereas a member of the public can just see their information, and a stewardship group or a company can look at their company's information. So that's what we mean by tiered access within the app dashboard.
Perfect. And it looks like that is our final question.
Well, thanks for your time, everyone. And I will be back on the November 18th, I believe, presenting on the watercourse crossing program at large. So, you have my email and you have the website. So please send me any further questions you have, or if I didn't quite get it at answering your questions, please reach out to me.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for that wonderful presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined. With continued education and information sharing, we believe we can fix this provincially significant issue. Please join us again Thursday, October 21st, for our next webinar on the Canadian Aquatic Barriers Database, presented by Nick Mazzani-Wright from the Canadian Wildlife Federation. And I guess that will conclude our presentation for today. Thanks, everyone.